videos that we did together. Leo are up there now, so people can understand the history of what we're covering, because a lot of times we just focus on the present and don't really step back and look at the bigger picture of the journey that we have gone through with COVID-19 and where we're going. So it's important to preserve the record, and we are journalists in this particular realm. And we were covering it at the very beginning, so we are somewhat of experts and historians of covering SARS-CoV-2, far more than, let's say, quote, the experts that are teaching medical school. So but that's a different topic of discussion. But it's going pretty good on Rumble and on Brighteon, definitely Brighteon. But we need more people to accrete so the videos can go viral on the channels. My strategy is to use the networks like Daryl's to reach out to a larger audience in the tens of thousands, and also to talk on shows like Mike Adams' Health Ranger channel, or Doug Hagman, and reach 100,000. Views. I just did a video just recently with Mike Adams that reached over 40,000, talking about some of the effects of immunoglobulins when you take too many boosters, and how that may create a new catastrophic event 5 years down the road when our immune system is somewhat hardwired to the old epitope. So it's doing okay. It's doing okay, but it's not going as fast as I'd like it to. But that is the world that we live in, and this is how we adapt to survive. Daryl is a CB, and he knows all about, you just got to make it happen. You just, whatever it is, you make it happen, and that's what we're doing. We're dealing with the situation that we're in right now, and we will conquer.
Now we have Dr. Fauci that has, of course, introduced the fall with his usual BS. We are going for him towards a dark winter. Once again, we talk about dark winter. I think a term that we use in precedence by Joe Biden. So he has picked up on that. And for that reason, I wanted to just make you listen to a couple of extracts from this podcast in which Dr. Fauci announces this bright new future, 183 million doses after, because we have 183 million people who have been vaccinated. This guy still says we're going to have a dark winter if we don't all get vaccinated. So unless Americans get all vaccinated to a very high degree, that's what he said, we are in trouble. Here is Dr. Fauci. Let's see what he says. I mean, this guy, of course, is flip-flopping all the time, but
it's more likely a natural occurrence of a jumping of species in the environment in the animal human.
So he still likes to defend his theory that it's of a natural origin. He doesn't give up on that.
Interface.
Right.
However, since you have not yet definitively proven that, you must always keep an open mind of the possibility.
So then you still have to keep an open mind on the possibility. I mean, it seems like Dr. Fauci is not giving up on his theory of the natural origin.
Right. The thing is, I can talk about this for 10 hours, but, just in a nutshell, there is 100% no doubt that he paid for the further gain of function at multiple labs, including Wuhan, to develop the coronavirus that we call SARS-CoV-2. And not only that, Peter Daszak on C-SPAN was caught talking in 2016 about Dr. Xi's research from Wuhan and how he funded it. That was 2016. The paper, the Genesis paper of the chimeras that made the gain of function to the jump to the ACE2 receptor was published in February of 2008. There is no doubt, 100%, that this was man-made. 100%. And the thing is that it's part of a developmental weapons program from the United States, the Department of Defense. And not only that, the messenger RNA that Malone was a part of comes right out of DARPA. DARPA works with the Defense Department. This was not zoonotic. Most viruses that mankind encounters, the far majority are zoonotic. This one is not. This one is 100% man-made, and I can prove it. And, but the data is out there. The videos are out there on how it can be proved, and the HIV homology. And not only that, what was being funded and what Barrick was working with Dr. Sims and Dr. Shi at different times between 2008 to 2013. 100% this was man-made. He's lying. And not only that, Rand Paul was showing in Congress the paper trail from the leaked emails from Fauci. And in one of the leaked emails, it states what the recipe is to make it, which goes back to the 2008 paper that I keep on referencing from Dr. Shi. There's 100%. Any virologist that says that this was zoonotic and that was out of nature is 100% wrong. And they need to step up to the plate, become humble, and realize that it was a weapons program from the United States that was partially developed by the Chinese and further developed. And then when they start teaching in medical school the truth, then maybe the medical students that are actually going to be on the battlefield trying to treat this goddamn virus will actually know what we're dealing with, instead of hiding and saying that, there wasn't a weapons program that went awry. So we need truth on this. And Fauci keeps on playing the same card. Oh, it's zoonotic. And not only that, in 2015, she and Barrick came out with a paper about the emergence of MERS that's going to happen in the Middle East. And this paper was released in 2015. And this is part of the unified field theory that I have, that the United States government was going to drop MERS in the Middle East in Syria as part of a weapons program. So these virologists, yes, they know a lot, but they don't realize the nefarious things that are going on at the DOD.
In the case of Dr. Fauci, it seems pretty obvious that he's never been biased about it. So, he has way too many interests. And so he has a conflict of interest to deal with, aside from his role. Here we have...
What you just mentioned, a laboratory leak or someone who was out doing research in the field who got infected while working with a pathogen in the laboratory, those are all possibilities. There is no evidence to indicate that that's happened, but you still must leave an open mind.
Here's the thing is that
from the national.
This guy drives me nuts. I want this guy hung from a tree for treason and for crimes against humanity against the Helsinki Code and the Nuremberg Code. There's the Nuremberg Code, and then there's the Geneva Convention that the United States hasn't signed it onto, and then the Helsinki. The thing is, there's enough international law out there to convict this guy and have him executed for crimes against humanity. And there's no doubt in my mind that he had a major part to play in this damn weapon. Now, the thing is that
the reality of today, Paul, unfortunately, is part of the great reset that goes along with this brave new world of ours, which is, of course, the fruit of insanity from the start. So, it's like...
Right. And what it is by using One World Health, and trying to have a health organization, One World Health is tied to the WHO. Obviously, the WHO is tied into the UN, and then they would have more control about how to distribute health around the world. And they're using the zoonotic theory as a way to stop human encroachment in natural reservoirs. All right. That's their theory. That's what they're doing. They're trying to prevent encroachment. They're trying to prevent sprawl, human sprawl. All right. So they blame it on a bat in a cave that Dr. Shi took out of the cave in 2005 and modified its genome in 2007. That's exactly what happened. And I can prove it, 100% prove it. It's not innuendo. I have the paper trail, the documents are on my website, and there's and any student of this needs to wake up and realize that there was a weapons program that was developed.
Let's remind our viewers and listeners that this is the Leo Zagami Show with Leo Zagami and Dr. Paul Cottrell with a rundown of this week's news, of course, focusing always on the medical side with Dr. Cottrell. We heard a few passages from this controversial new interview that was given by Dr. Fauci to this podcast that it's broadcast by CBS. And in this podcast, Dr. Fauci once again takes out this theme of this dark winter if we are not vaccinated. And another threat, of course.
Right.
And at the same time, they are censoring, though, the people who seem to have some serious consequences from this vaccine. A college athlete that got 4 million views on TikTok. I'm going to now broadcast it so you can listen what he said. Was censored by TikTok. Now, TikTok doesn't usually censor anything. But we have seen lately, and TikTok, of course, is Chinese-owned, Chinese-based. We have seen this increased censorship moving in also on TikTok. This college athlete basically is suffering the consequences of the vaccines. Like today seems to happen to a lot of people, Paul. It's not just a occasional circumstance. There seems to be a lot more side effects. And in this case, of course, that we are about to play is one of them, but it's not the only one. He took his second dose of the Pfizer vaccine and at the end of August and ended up in these conditions. Here he is, and here is his testimony for those who are listening and for those, of course, who are viewing us.
In the hospital right now with heart complications from the COVID-19 vaccine. And I want to inform as many people as I can about the risks from taking the vaccine that I wish someone would have told me. So I am a Division I student athlete with no prior health issues. And I got the second COVID shot Tuesday. And within 4 days, I have been diagnosed with myocarditis and was told that I probably won't be able to play my senior season now. It is a side effect from the COVID vaccine, and it's really not being reported or addressed, and it is a serious issue that we should all be informed about before making this decision. It isn't right for people to be forced to take the vaccine because there are actual side effects like this that could happen to you, and the NCAA should not mandate student athletes to get the vaccine because of what could happen to so many fellow student athletes from health issues, which has happened to me. Everyone should be informed of the side effects, and no one should be forced to take something that could cause what has happened to me, and no one knows the long-term effects of what's possibly going to happen from this. And it's kind of uncharted territories because everyone else was the same.
Wow.
So
it's kind of pretty
right, you know, and it's huge.
Paul,
it's huge what he's saying.
Some problems here on listening your voice at the moment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. So there's a lot to say on this.
Yes.
Because of the censorship that is going on YouTube, I was not able to reach out to more people to warn them. I told from the very beginning in February and in March of 2020 that there was going to be autoimmune disorders. One of these are going to be the myocarditis.
I reviewed a paper in early 2020 that was talking about individuals that ended up getting SARS-CoV-2 that were student athletes from either the college level or at, let's say, senior or sophomore level in high school. All right. Now, they started having the myocarditis, but it was through the natural infection. That was the first sign of this. And I warn people that when they start getting the vaccine, that because of the antibodies being produced for the S1 subunit, you're going to have the same thing happen. And what happened is that I did a video talking about how it is affecting the heart and the electrical system, because what happens, there's a wave that shoots from the AV. No, I don't want to get too technical, but basically it shoots through the heart, and then the exterior of the heart shoots back. So it comes out and then shoots back. And what happens is that process is damaged. I did that video in 2020 of July, warning people of myocarditis. YouTube took it down. I have been right from day one. And I am one of the most censored individuals on this topic, SARS-CoV-2 and the after effects of the real real infection and the vaccines. There's not a person on the planet that is as censored as I am and has as much content as I have. And I have told people and tried to warn people that when their child is getting the vaccine, that if you're a student athlete, you have a high probability of getting some sort of autoimmune disorder. And that there's a way to stop it. And that was to reduce the inflammation before you take the damn vax. My research on the TAP protein proves 100% that you can reduce IgG. If you take anti-inflammatories before you take the vaccine and during the two shots, between the two shots in the interim, and you do a maintenance protocol, you're reducing the inflammation and reducing the chances of the myocarditis. You're reducing the chances of peripheral nervous system disorders. You're reducing the chances of having your organs chopped up from antibodies that you've been making that are causing the autoimmune disorder. And you're reducing the chances of the cytotoxic T cells from producing too many cytokines that produces the actual thrombosis that everyone's talking about, the blood clotting. I've been right since the mid of 2020. Now you're playing a kid that's saying, I wish I had more information. Fauci lied to the public by saying that he didn't fund the gain of function. Fauci's lying to the public that the gain of function is HIV homology. And not only that, you have Zuckerberg that has taken me down, I don't know, more than 200 times. And I have 1,500 videos that have to be hidden because I'm trying to preserve the record that could have informed the public to save that kid. That kid will permanently be damaged. Permanently. Because Zuckerberg thought it was better to have the CDC dogma be discussed instead of having a real conversation on what the real issue is with this virus and the vaccine. And how do you slow down the progression?
I want to just say that what we just saw was a video by the Tennessee State University golf team member John Stokes.
Well, for the people that are listening,
and who was discussing, of course, his myocarditis following the second vaccine.
Leo, I just wanted to mention that because I'm uploading to the Safe Harbor, which is Brighteon, the old catalog, if you type in endocarditis, you will see the video that I'm talking about. And that was begging people to pay attention to the potentiality of the autoimmune disorder that either is coming from the vaccine or from the natural infection for student athletes. And the DOD knows this. You know why? Because if you drop it in an environment that has soldiers, you're weakening the soldiers. It was designed that way.
Now, Paul, he said the specific thing. He said, I wish someone would have told me. And of course, somebody could have told him if, like you said, pointed out, people like Zuckerberg or YouTube or the other social networks that are, of course, part of the mainstream.
Zuckerberg is complicit. Zuckerberg is complicit on the harm that is happening to student athletes.
Well,
for sure.
Well,
in this case, for
example, of course, like we said, this is a young athlete that wants to inform and wanted to inform now through TikTok and was censored also on TikTok. So, I mean, it's not only Zuckerberg here that censors.
This is why I keep on saying that we're in the Bio-Patriot Act realm. You know, right after 9/11, they rolled in the Patriot Act, and if you say anything against the government, you must be a terrorist.
Back to the time in which Donald J. Trump was president and TikTok was about to be completely closed down. Then that unfortunately never happened. And so now we have TikTok still taking all the data of the American students, of the American people, and pouring them into, of course, the artificial intelligence in the hands of the Chinese government. So, I mean, that's also something that happens, unfortunately, with TikTok. But going back in general to the censorship we are talking about today, of course, people could have known much more if there wasn't all this censorship.
Right, because it's, you know, because they're censoring, you know, other doctors that are talking about other therapeutics like the ivermectin and the hydroxychloroquine. They're censoring individuals that are covering I've been really focused on the autoimmune disorder. That's been a big focus of mine. All right, so they're censoring that. They censored Dr. Gold. They censored Bosch. They've censored Tenpenny. They've censored lots of people. They've censored Mike Adams, and they've censored Ty and his wife. I can't remember her name. Charlie, I think it is. That's been talking about vaccines and how they potentially can cause cancer. They have a website and an organization that teaches people. But they censored them too.
Yeah, there is an interesting thing though that we can also talk about always in line with the censorship. There is also the participation of a whole academic world that is not only Dr. Fauci, but in general, a bunch of professors, a bunch of academics that seem to push this.
Exactly. I'll tell you what. That, you know, some of my professors in medical school, I like a lot. Some of them I think are idiots. Some of them are MDs, some of them are PhDs, some of them are both.
And now,
you know, and the thing,
Paul, sorry to interrupt you, but they might actually not be idiots. They might actually be taking a lot of money on the side because documents that surfaced just now, thanks to the Epoch Times, say that distinguished U.S. professors participated in controversial Chinese recruitment plan. Right. So, I mean, these are not idiots. These are people who are
part of the 1,000 talent plan. This is part of the 1,000 talent plan. Right. And that, you know, they get paid to do technology transfer. They get paid to do these mad experiments, these Frankenstein experiments. Barrick gets paid to make this stuff in his lab. That's the problem. We need to shine a light on that. And instead, we have professors in our medical schools that are just pushing the dogma that every virus is zoonotic. Yeah, right. You know, like the DOD doesn't make weapons. You know, like the nuclear bomb just naturally happened, you know, to just natural assemble
here
in a rainforest.
We have people that are receiving from China millions of dollars. They are selling out, of course, our medical system, but also our educational system that should prepare.
Here's the problem, Leo, is that the professors, there's a combination of laziness and they're on the take. Not every professor's on the take, but there is this there's this intellectual laziness. They buy into the dogma and they're not willing to question it once they're in the system because they're afraid they'll lose their job or they'll lose their license. And so they're not willing to take the risks like what I'm doing or what Dr. Gold was doing. Dr. Gold was fired from her ER department. So there are many doctors out there that are trying to inform the public that, hey, wait a minute, something is awry here. We need to look into it. What the problem here is that in the medical schools and in the medical establishment that's out there, they have focused on the dogma too much and they don't have the intellectual curiosity to ask the question, is my government doing something wrong? And there's tons of evidence to suggest they have done this for decades, like syphilis with the Black community. You know, the LSD programs that they were doing in the 50s and 60s. They made Charles Manson. They made the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, through MK Ultra. So to say that the government isn't doing things bad is not being intellectually honest. And so when individuals actually question and say, there is evidence here to suggest the nefarious activities, we need to investigate and hold these people accountable.
I have a technical suggestion for you from somebody here in the chat. I think that your camera, because you have a new iPad, might slightly be more high-tech than the previous one. And for that reason, you should have more light. No, I'm just telling you a suggestion because you're gonna see on the video later when you replay it on your side that there is this kind of fluctuations. It happens when
I don't know I don't know.
Maybe you have
no, the fan's off.
No,
I don't know what the.
I'm just telling you that because, of course.
Is that better or worse?
A little bit better, but like I said, it probably depends from the way you have your lights and your camera pointed, because this is a new camera, yeah?
Yeah.
And I know this myself. I know this myself when I put, in fact, for those who are viewing me, I've just changed myself the settings of my own camera, because when you put it too high, at times you have to have a light setting which is even more powerful.
Yeah, I don't know. But what's more important is me finding a way to. What's more important is me finding a way to hang Fauci.
Of course, and the more important thing is the message, because this could be a podcast, and I mean we are broadcasting also for people who are following us on Aftermath FM and on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network on the radio, and they don't even have a video of what we are actually of this show. So they are actually listening to us, and that's also something that functions very well. Now, going back to this whole situation, this week we have a lot of news, of course, from the COVID world. And we saw the CDC basically bypassing the FDA. The FDA, as we all know, over a week ago, did their meeting about the fact that we needed or not this booster. The FDA dropped the suggestion given by President Joe Biden. But something happened. The CDC bypassed the FDA and instead is going for the booster. Now, this is creating a lot of confusion for the people, because the Food and Drug Administration should be the one approving it, no? Instead, the Food and Drug Administration said no, for people between the age of 16 and 65, is still not safe to recommend a booster. And we all also know from what you said in the previous episode that, of course, the more you inject, the less this vaccine is going to become effective. And so the suggestion of Dr. Paul Cotrello was to avoid it. No, from I remember last
Well,
week.
you try to avoid it as much as possible, but not people won't be able to
But
avoid
now
it
the
completely.
CDC is bypassing the FDA. Now that is something I wanted to ask you about.
Well, the thing is that the discussion that they had was, should they have boosters or not? And the answer for it is it's tiered. It's going to be stepwise. For individuals that are 65 and up or have immune compromising disorders, they are suggesting for them to get the booster. Part of the calculus is that there is a international outcry for countries that haven't had even one shot yet to get supplies so they can at least get a certain level of antibodies in their population. This is independent on if you're pro-vaccine or anti-vax. I'm just stating facts, all right? So that's what that was in their mind is, okay, do we provide aid to third world countries and provide some supply instead of hogging it up? And is the evidence out there to suggest that boosters are needed at this moment in time in the United States population? And they judge that the evidence is suggesting that it should be 65 and up or immune compromised. You got to remember, though, that they were the first, that was the first cohort to get the vaccine. So, of course, when you're going to be doing a stepwise tiered system, you're going to be starting with the first group for the booster round. I suspect that they'll come back and you're going to hear that Moderna has provided evidence, Johnson & Johnson's provided evidence for even people that are in their 40s and 50s to be getting the booster probably after the 6 to 8 month mark, probably the 8 month mark. So it is just a matter of time when we start hearing that boosters are coming. The question now goes, will there be an outcry in the American public to say no to boosters? And if there isn't an outcry to stop it, will there be individuals that actually, do the precautionary things that I've been mentioning to reduce the chance of an autoimmune disorder by reducing inflammation? You can prep your body to bring down the inflammation. I don't want to make this sound like it's a sales speech, but the thing is that my research on the TAT protein showed that when you use the TAT protein, you can bring down pro-inflammatory cytokines. You can bring up the anti-inflammatory cytokines in the localized tissue that's been attacked. You bring down the antibody titer level of whatever is causing the autoimmune disorder. And you start to see less recruitment of macrophages for the destruction of the tissue. You can mimic the benefits of TAT, because that's a controlled substance, that you can mimic those benefits by doing the protocol that I've been mentioning on my channel going all the way back to 2020, mid-2020. You got to remember, I was one of the first ones to say that you can naturally take 3CL protease inhibitors that were antiviral, that were from health food supplements, such as birch bark extract. That's a 3CL protease inhibitor. All right, and also chaga mushroom, which is the same compound, just in higher concentration. But there's other things that you can take that actually blocks the 3CL. I was the first one to say this about the protease inhibitors. Now it's about reducing the inflammation, reduce the chances of an autoimmune disorder. How do you do that to mimic what I discovered in my research with TAT? You take this protocol, I'll just run it really quick. You take ashwagandha, and the recipe is here on the screen, and I think I fixed the issue that you saw, that hopefully the resolution is better.
Yes.
But, what it was smeared. It was just a thumbprint, and it was trying to readjust the camera.
Ah,
All right. Okay. So the ashwagandha, take 2 ashwagandha. You can get this on my store. All right. So you go to my store and you can get this stuff. Use discount 5, all caps, and you get $5 off. So ashwagandha, take 2 of them per day. Take 6 turmerics. You take 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 2 at night per day. You take 2 tablespoons of C60, either the avocado oil or the coconut oil. The coconut oil has the MCT oil, that is antiviral. You take 2 resveratrols. You take 2 NMNs. I don't sell NMN. I have to buy that in very, very large quantities and like 5 kilos, and it might cost $40,000 just to have the inventory. So, but you can get that on Amazon. You can, all right. And what that does is it's a pre-molecule to help build other molecules such as NAD+. This helps with sirtuin health and mitochondrial health. And then you take 1 tablespoon of Max 30, which is my liquid nano. This neutralizes pathogens. So if you do get something, it's neutralizing it early in your oral cavity, so your body doesn't have to try to fight that. All right. What you do is you do this protocol 4 days before you take the vaccine. Once you take the vaccine, then during that wait time, when you have to take the second shot, you do this protocol. So it's usually 4 weeks. And then after you take the second shot.
Let me interrupt a second, Paul. You are basically giving a protocol for those.
I'm giving you the protocol and what I did.
Forced to take this vaccine. I mean, we
yes
don't
because what I'm doing is
to make it clear.
This is what I did. This is what I did, and this is what you can do to mimic the effects of TATs.
I know, but you should always remind our listeners and viewers that you were forced to get in the vaccine because of your medical status.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I was force vaxxed.
So
I'm not pro-vax, I'm not anti-vax, but I was force vaxxed. And the people that have been force vaxxed need to start calling the system out for what it really did. And it was they forced us. Even if you wanted it, if they said you can't be in medical school or you can't do something, you can't be in a job unless you're being vaccinated, that's force vaxxed by definition.
Okay.
So if you take this protocol for 4 days before you take the shot, and then the duration before the next shot, the same protocol. And then what you do is that you wait after the 4 days after your last shot. And then you go down to a maintenance level or this for 14 days. My maintenance, I went down to a maintenance level. And that's my normal anti-aging protocol. So what I did was when you drop it down, once you go after the 4 days from the last shot, then you drop your turmeric level down to 2. And you drop your C60 to 1 tablespoon. And then what I do is the Max 35, I went down to 1 teaspoon instead of 1 tablespoon per day. And then I went down to a maintenance level, and you maintain that throughout the whole time. If you don't want to do the maintenance, then do the protocol 14 days past the last shot. Because what you're doing is you're calming the whole idea, the science behind this. The science behind this is that as you're getting that second shot to make the IgGs, okay?
Yes.
This period of time, all right, is around 14 days. All right. So once you get that shot, you're trying to calm your system for that 14-day period. But the longer you calm your system, the lower you're bringing those antibodies down that could potentially do damage to tissue, such as myocarditis. That is what I did. So all these people that say, I wish I was informed on what I could maybe do to work around the forced situation, I just told you what to do. And I'm putting this video up on Brighteon so it doesn't have to be hidden, so it doesn't get taken down. I'm going to do another show with Mike Adams, and I'm going to go into detail why this works. And, this is how you get through this. So we can actually shine a light on the people that perpetrated this on us and make sure that we're alive to see them executed in a court, from a court of law judgment.
Well, somebody said having problems seeing Paul's whiteboard. Well, I would suggest eventually you can go on Paul's own channel when this will be rebroadcast on Rumble and Brighton, and maybe he will have a more clear image of the board. Anyway, most people are appreciating your suggestions, Paul. Of course, a lot of people seems to be more inclined, at least from my audience, in not getting the vaccine at all. But here we are talking, I repeat, for those who have just tuned in, for those people who have been forced vaccinated, just like Dr. Paul Cottrell, and he's giving basically some pretty interesting solutions that you can adapt to this.
Right. The thing is that this is unique. No one is saying this. No one is telling you how to reduce your inflammation. Everyone's saying just take ivermectin. It'll work. It'll help, but it won't stop an autoimmune disorder. Hydroxychloroquine will help neutralize the pathogen, but it won't prevent an autoimmune disorder. I just gave you the solution how to stop the myocarditis. I just gave you a solution how to slow down the thrombosis. I just gave you a solution to prevent the peripheral nervous system disorders that people are complaining about. Why? Because I saw it with tact. So, unfortunately, we have a medical community that's got their head up their ass, and they're not really focusing on the problem at hand. And that is, we have a crisis. And when in a crisis, you use everything. You use the individuals that have different skill sets. You have individuals that have a certain creativity on how to solve problems, and question dogma, because the dogma is what got us here.
Well, yeah, of course, the dogma and the belief that their version of science is the only accepted version of science, and so that there is no other options that we can follow. But instead, as you can see, Dr. Paul Cottrell is giving you some very some precious advice. Now, let's carry on, of course, with the news of the week that is analyzed by me and Dr. Paul Cottrell. And as Dr. Paul Cottrell has a past life as a renewed financial expert, I would like to ask him about instead the other problem that is facing the world markets, the bankruptcy of the Chinese real estate company Evergrande, which apparently is much bigger and much more dangerous than what happened with the Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was probably a different situation. Here we have China who wants to save, of course, also the image of China, of which Evergrande is part of it. This is a bankruptcy that could definitely create a lot of problems. Have you studied or analyzed this whole?
I mean, I haven't analyzed it specifically, but it's the same issue. It's called systemic risk. When you have an agent that gets too big, it causes a systemic issue. And what happens is that if they're so big, what will happen is they'll privatize the gains and they'll socialize the risks. And that is exactly what is happening with our banking institutions today in the United States. And
but it seems to me.
And so you heard in the news. What was people were hearing in the news is, oh, there's going to be a collapse. This could be like a Lehman, and all the secondary and tertiary effects of a liquidation, a meltdown, a potential market crash, not only in China but worldwide, because it would affect world markets. So people were starting to worry about the systemic risk. But the president of China, you know, is now intervening. And I just saw a couple days ago that they increased their price by almost 25%. You know, so there was a big sell-off, and then so they're getting bailed out. The same thing was happening with our banks. We were getting bailed out.
Evergrande seems to have lost a lot of money in investments on the real estate market in China.
Right.
That, didn't really...
It's real estate markets this part I do have dived into. It's real estate projects in China, but also in other countries. And so, and what was happening is that it was kind of like the GE model. GE would have you finance through GE Finance. So you would buy a GE product, all right? And then GE would finance it. If you remember with Lehman, during that crisis, GE almost collapsed because of the way the financing was. They financed their own sales. Same issue with GM financing, GMC financing. Same issue with Ford. Same issue with Chrysler. All right. So they were falling into the same trap. They were doing projects, and then they had another side that was helping with the lending, the lending capability.
Yeah, but a simple question: how much you think the Western banks are exposed to this crack? These projects, of course, that they go on within China, okay, but how does it affect the common, the man in the street, the man who has a bank account and suddenly there is...
Well, let me draw using agent-based modeling. All right, this is what our Treasury Department does. All right, you have an entity that is at risk, okay, and they're connected to another entity, all right? And that connection is, let's say, 0.9%. 1 is 100%, okay? So 0.9 is 90%, so 0.9. This entity is getting funds from little projects. But let's say 2/3 of the projects are failing. So 1/3 of the cash flows are sustainable, but 2/3 are not. And that is affecting this person. Now, what happens is this person now has loan agreements to other entities at, let's say, 0.5, so 50% exposure. The point I'm making is that even if you have something that seems so benign, there's a cascade effect that leads to kind of this fire sale in the market. That's exactly what happened in Lehman. So you have to not look at just the primary people that are tied to the agreement, but you have to look at the secondary, the tertiary, and the fourth degree. So when you get to this level, it balloons out and causes a very strong systemic risk. This is why when the banks start seeing that, when the central bank, when I say banks, I mean the central bank at this point, when the central banks start seeing this, like the ECB and the Fed, then they come in, the Fed comes in with their discount window and says, pump money in, put dollars in here to stabilize, to prevent the spread of the fire.
Of course, you are a financial expert, but it seems to me that China is really based on a huge indebted model, where to create 1 unit of GDP, you have to invest 10 units of debt. I mean, it seems like they are...
Well, there's not much difference with the United States.
I mean, we are on the same ship in that. The market...
Right. So, but the point I'm making here is that our banks do have secondary and tertiary exposure. Not only primary, they have some primary exposure, but that's not really where where the worry is.
It's a symptom of something bigger that is about to occur.
I think that the Chinese are young enough in their growth phase of their country to be able to absorb the losses of this quasi-Lehman event. And they will pump money into the system, and they'll make it even bigger down the road.
So you have, okay, let me be synthetic here. The hope that you have basically, or that you are here explaining to us, is that the government in China will fix things.
In the short run, they're going to pump money into the system and stabilize it. They're going to use their central bank.
So
they're going to stabilize, and they're going to stabilize the situation. And what will happen is what Hayek was warning everybody, with central bank planning. You're just kicking the can down the road for a bigger event to happen. And their Lehman is down the road, not now.
Somebody's asking me, Dr. Paul, Leo, what is their end game here? Gain of function, vaccines, boosters, what is the purpose? So now we go back to, of course, talking about the vaccine in this case, but as we all know, it's all interconnected. So one thing, it seems to be connected with the other, the economy, the vaccines, the climate change agenda, or false climate change agenda. There has been a lot of talk now about the relaunch of the nuclear electricity as a clean source of electricity, because of course they need electricity for their electric cars and all that. But what is the end game when it comes to the boosters? Is it like going simply to make a favor to the pharmaceutical industry and sell more doses, or there is some other hidden agenda?
There's a couple different camps. Because I have a PhD, I look at things in a complex way. I apologize, but there's a few camps. One camp is thinking this is the Great Reset, and it's the plandemic to create the Great Reset. Mm-hmm. There's other camp that I fall into that it was a weapons program that was released.
Well, but couldn't the weapons program be part of the Great Reset? Sorry.
I'm trying to answer the question: what's going on with the vaccines? Okay. So there's people that think that the vaccine is the means for control, which is possible. I think the vaccine is means to inoculate our population against biological warfare, and that they're trying to get people force vaccinated because they're trying to inoculate our population for a biological exchange with China or a drop in the Middle East. Now, it's hard to get your head around that. But the thing is that in a strange way, in biological warfare, we are going to need to inoculate our population to make sure that we don't die from a biological warfare. This is what they did to my brother when he went into the army. They inoculated him with anthrax vaccines. The people that have the Gulf War syndrome, that is tied to vaccines and potentially the chemical agents that were released. So we're dealing with a crazy world that's run by the DOD and the Pentagon, making things they shouldn't be making. And part of their strategy is to have a yearly dose of something to make sure that you have some level of antibodies against the potentiality of what is being dropped. They're getting us programmed to accept this is what I need to do to stay safe. But they put it under the umbrella zoonotic. But this is really a biological security program that is going on here. And there's going to be a lot of people that go, oh, that's not happening. I'm telling you, it's happening. This is what is going on. This is a weapons program, and that the Pentagon wants everyone to be like what they do to the soldiers. like they did to my brother. And that is, everyone has to have their shots of XYZ because they might see that in the battlefield. Well, the battlefield has come to the citizens now. It's not in the desert. It's not in the jungle in South Vietnam. It's at our doorstep. And so the Pentagon is starting a program where you're going to be inoculated just like you're a little soldier. Now, I personally think we need to shine a light on the Pentagon and these generals and all these researchers that are doing this and prosecute them for crimes against humanity because they shouldn't be making these things to begin with. So I diverge from the plandemic crowd saying that the whole end of this was to force vaccinate and to depopulate. I think it's force vaccinate for biosecurity. That falls more in line with the thinkings of the Pentagon. That falls more in line with the thinkings of the DoD. So that's my take on it. I know it diverges from, let's say, Mikovits's, Judy Mikovits's, her theory on it. It might even deviate from Mike Adams' theory, but I think that I am more closer to the truth in terms of the vaccine program in the United States, that it's tied to biological security. And I don't think it's right. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying I think that's what's going on.
Of course, you're following your own
Right.
view of things. You are also making us participant of your own thesis, and we are grateful for that. Of course, people who enjoy the Leo Zagami show, as well as Dr. Paul Cottrell, know very well that at times we diverge also in our ideas of things. But in the end,
but it's important. It's important to have a caveat, though, is that you can have a situation happening, right? And there's other actors outside of the DoD and the Pentagon that are trying to take advantage of it and do the Great Reset. See, there's not just one bad guy. There could be multiple bad guys taking advantage of the situation here.
In fact, here the Leo Zagami show, as all my viewers and listeners know, the Jesuits and what has been going on in the very early stage of the pandemic with the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates all meeting up, the Rothschild all meeting.
Well, do you remember the movie? Do you remember the movie Dr. Strangelove? And the cowboy, is riding that bomb all the way down.
No.
Remember that scene? Okay, it's a famous scene where he's riding the H bomb all the way down, and he's like with his cowboy hat. Just imagine, the Pope on a nuclear weapon being dropped from, let's say, a B-52 in a similar situation as Dr. Strangelove, and he in his hand also is mixing test tubes. Where he's making biological weapons at the same time. That is what is going on. In a metaphor, you have heads of state or heads of very deep organizations like the Vatican, that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and they're bringing hell on earth and affecting everyone's life. And this is why I keep on saying it's pernicious. It's unconstitutional, and it's our right and obligation to shine a light on them and through a court of law to make sure that they're held accountable. This is our duty as, of our generation to do this. I just don't feel as though we have enough people. We have a lot of people listening. This broadcast, we're going to have about 73,000 people listening to us right now. All right. How many of those 73,000 people are actually going to go to my store and purchase the anti-aging and anti-inflammatory protocol? How many people are actually going to go to Amazon and buy your books that have fully explained in detail the issues with the Jesuits and the Vatican? The point I'm making is there's a lot of people on the couch. There's not enough people on the battlefield like you and I. trying to move the ball forward and prevent this from happening to us. Some of it's altruistic. Some of it is that we're trying to help our fellow patriot. But it's also self-preservation. Because if we don't do it, who's going to do it for us? People need to get into this mindset. They need to get off the couch, stop eating the bonbons, get on the battlefield, and start pushing back and say no to this stuff and shine a light. When someone says, you have to take a vaccine, and why don't we say why? Where's the evidence that this is safe for me? And oh, by the way, go all the way back to, why are we taking this thing again? Oh, that's right. They made a weapon that they shouldn't have made, gave it to the Chinese for the Chinese to release it. Oh, wow. And now Johnny can't have a job because he doesn't want to take the vaccine? Because the DOD made a weapon that Fauci funded? This is insane. This is a world of insanity. The only way to get out of insanity is to start getting rid of the people that are causing the insanity through a court of law or hire Batman. I'm not sure which.
Well, definitely protesting on in the streets doesn't do much. We have seen it in Australia. They keep on getting beaten up and they don't really get any results. The same is happening in Europe. In Italy, even today, there is more protest, but they don't seem to really get any results from these protests. So the solution in this case, what is it? I mean,
I stated last year in the summer that the only way out, I know people will not understand what I'm saying until after the fact. But I said last year, the only way out of this is a war. We have to do 1776.
But now, in that case, you are not talking only about, because here I'm talking about the world. I'm talking about all our listeners and our viewers that follow us often from places like New Zealand.
Well, the thing is, we have international audience too. But 1776 revolution was also an international audience. Yeah. It was the French. It was the Germans. It wasn't just the Americans doing the fighting. So if they want to come, if there's some Russians out there that want to help, if there's some Spaniards that want to help, if there's some even Italians that want to help, fight 1776, in the United States, I'm all for that. I'm even for the Haitians coming in to fight 1776. The problem is that we have to fight.
Who went there to criticize what happened at the border, once again saying, "Oh, the cowboys brought us back in time, the worst moments of American history," and all that. I mean, it's always about beating down Americanism, and the cowboys, of course, are the symbol of America. No, and the fact that they have basically reprimanded them, and they were only doing their job. They were not using the whip. They were using simply the reins to carry on having this kind of job.
There's a law on the books that states that you can detain someone if they're breaking the law for the authorities to come and pick them up. That's exactly what they did. There's nothing wrong with that. It's legal.
But it seems
there's nothing wrong with that.
In this new twisted version of reality, everything it's like you do the right thing, you get punished. You do the wrong thing, you get awarded. And actually,
well, if you remember when where's the big talk about SARS-CoV-2 spreading because of people coming from south of the border? There are these variants called the Brazilian variant, the Colombian variant, the Peruvian variant. That are very deadly, that could spread in the United States if you have a porous border. Where is the talk on this? This is a major biological security issue. Major. Not little, major. But they're not willing to do anything about it. But you know what? You can't go to school without a mask on. You can't go to school without your vaccine. But they'll let the porous border wide open. So you know what? Those people that were doing the raw hiding, and riding those bucks and, and trying to, corral the illegals coming in, I think they did their patriotic duty, because there's an invasion happening here. The word's invasion, not immigration, not migration. It's invasion. What are you going to do to stop it? The government's not doing anything about it. If it was your own homestead, if it was your own ranch, and this was happening to your ranch,
I know this
don't you think that you would do something about it?
Yeah. I know this one thing, though, that in Europe, in Australia, in Great Britain, if we want to talk about Great Britain as separate from Europe, at least politically, there has been a lot of protests, even aggressive ones at times. Here in the United States, I've not seen one single protest. The vaccinations are actually quite high. I mean, compared to other countries, I think this is one of the most vaccinated countries in the world. There doesn't seem to be a will to fight this whole establishment. I mean, it seems like this will has been castrated altogether on the 6th of January 2021, when on Capitol Hill we assisted to those events. Unfortunately tragic, but mostly tragic because they have then limited our liberty in the long run. No?
Right. Right.
What do you think is going to happen? I mean, here we're talking about great American patriots who are, by the way, the only ones who have weapons. A lot of them do the big talk. They go on shows like Alex Jones and whatever and whatnot to talk about their militias and about this and that and about going rogue on the state and all that.
It's all talk and no walk.
Yeah.
What needs to happen is there just need to be an intelligentsia that's leading the show, not a bunch of yahoos with guns. These militias aren't cohesive, internally or externally. They're internally they're not cohesive within their own group, and they're definitely not there's no cohesion between groups. Mm-hmm. So what you need is an intelligentsia like what we had with our founding fathers, where we had the Continental Congress, right? And it was the Adams and the Hamiltons and the Jeffersons and the George Washingtons, those types of people that galvanized, used the Enlightenment, saying that we have self-determination, we're not subordinate to a king, and that we are going to fight for our rights and our freedoms. That's what we need. They have some good talk, but there's no walk. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that are running these militias, they're not too bright. Mm. So the problem here is that there needs to be a letter of grievance from the intelligentsia that wants to light a fire that is the next 1776. And that letter of grievance would be drafted and presented to Congress. And that letter of grievance is to go back to a pre-9/11 day and truncate these institutions that have grown too big and eroded our constitutional freedoms. If they don't, then we secede and we are not taxed. And we use the militias as the teeth to the letter of grievance. The letter of grievance is the analog, our analog, to the Declaration of Independence. If Congress doesn't want to fix the problem, then we leave and we no longer are taxed. But then what will happen is they'll tell General Miley, that, the soy boy, that, you have a bunch of terrorists out there trying to break away from the Union because they don't like this post 9/11 hell that they created. And so what they'll do is they'll instruct the Pentagon to fight us. Now the question is, will the militia have the backbone to defend the secession. That is the Civil War 2.0. The question is there enough people willing to do it? Now, I know you know Alex Jones pretty well, all right? He could be the John Hancock that financed that would finance the 1776 reboot. But he has to realize that he has to lose it all for the country to give it to a future generation. Alex Jones is not willing to do that. He's not willing to give up his life and his wealth for a future.
It doesn't.
And Adams and Hamilton and Washington were willing to bet it all.
You know.
So all these people that talk,
the only one. Alex reflects the general stand of the majority of today's population that that benefit from having certain things that are now given for granted. Once you start a civil war,
you can do a lot. You can do a lot with $40 million.
Yeah, but
you can do a lot with procurement of weapons with $40 million.
But it's also true that once you go in that direction, you are probably going to be bankrupt in a week. It's like what's happening with Project Veritas is very symptomatic. And Project Veritas has been really exposing in the last couple of weeks the FDA, the vaccines, with some testimonies that have been pretty interesting, and that has finally showed some truths about HHS and whatnot. But the problem here seems to me that then last week, for example, they suffered 165,000 grand, I think, loss because they got scammed by hackers who entered their own basically emails in some way and interacted as they were their own lawyers. They transferred this money. And so we know that Project Veritas has already been affected by the natural calamity. Their headquarters got submerged by water. Now they have also hackers trying to bring them down. It's difficult when you are going against the system. They're not going to make it easy for you,
and it's going to be more difficult in 20 years.
They're going to block your bank accounts.
Right. But my point is that if you don't act now, it's never going to happen, and we're going to have to wait another 400 years, not 40 years, 400 years before a generation will rise up and destroy the tyranny that has been created under our watch.
I think
our job, our mission is to prevent this from happening. I know it sounds, very, that I sound a bit revolutionary and Jeffersonian, but I'm telling you, Jefferson was right. If you don't hit the tyranny early, it's going to manifest.
Yeah, but here we have a country in which we have also other important figures. We have Hannity, for example, Fox itself.
But the thing is that the United States,
a lot of ambiguity. No, when it comes down to
maybe Hannity needs to swing from a tree too with Fauci. But the point here is that the American military cannot win a war that's asymmetric. They can't. They couldn't do it in Afghanistan. They didn't do it in Iraq. They couldn't do it in Syria. They couldn't do it in Vietnam. If you have a Tet offensive in the United States that is asymmetric and it's nationwide, the Pentagon can't do anything about it. And that is why January 6th failed, because it was centralized. If it was all over the country at the same time, and it was sustained, the military would not be able to stop it because there's more of us than of them.
I see always from all these anchormen, even from Newsmax, Sebastian Gorka, a lot of talk, a lot of aggressive talk, but not many practical solutions. They definitely seem to be great patriots. They seem to say the right things. Sebastian Gorka, with his show American First and all of what he's doing there after having assisted the president, is of course himself, like me, somebody who only recently is become American in a way. I am in the process of it. He's already one. But the problem is people like Sebastian Gorka, Hannity, other people on Newsmax and on other conservative outlets, they seem to be doing the right thing by denouncing, of course, the wrongdoing of the Democrats, of the New World Order, of George Soros every day. But the results are very modest because...
Here, I'll use an analogy that everyone can understand that's listening.
In the end, these are people who are carrying the information, Paul. They are not...
You know, the Hannity's out there, Hannity's out there. And the Gorsuch, I think that's how it's pronounced. I don't know, Gorsuch. But these individuals, even Bannon, Stephen Bannon, and Alex Jones, they're like at a restaurant and they're eating a big plate of nachos, all right? And they're complaining to the waitress. They don't like the taste of the salsa, all right? And they'll complain. And they said that they have a magazine that critiques restaurants, and they're going to complain about the restaurant. That's the level of the insanity that we're dealing with. We need to reboot 1776. And that means a war. And that means a document of a letter of grievance asking politely, Congress, fix the problem. If you don't fix the problem, we have to leave.
That you are abandoning altogether the political arena. I understand the
political arena is stacked against us. For example, you have a judicial branch that isn't supporting our constitutional freedoms. You have a constitution. You have a legislative branch that keeps on eroding our constitutional freedoms with these crazy laws that are passed, like the Patriot Act. And all this crazy spending that's going on, that's going to make us all go bankrupt. And then you have an executive branch that's selling the country to the Chinese. You don't have a government of the people for the people. You have a government of the high-powered and of the international establishment, not of the American citizen. And because that social contract has been broken, we have to draft a letter of grievance, a new Declaration of Independence. That is what needs to be had. And if anyone brings up, just happy talk about how bad the salsa is, you know what? It's not going to solve the problem, because the lobbying group wants the division. They want us to be complaining about the Democrats on one side and the other side complains about the Republicans, instead of unifying the country and drafting a letter of grievance. See, yes. We were unified. Back in 1776, we were more unified.
Yes, but we were also intellectually very different from what we are today, Paul. We didn't have the impact of social media in our lives. We didn't have this immediate transmission of information. Look at what happened with the Gabri Petito story that everybody talks about in America, that focus the interest of many people around this poor young girl. I mean, is a typical phenomenon of today's world. A phenomenon in which, of course, we can find, for example, a person, and we can focus all the attention of a whole country on this person, on what happened to this person, and distract the whole country from other more important, of course, events. So while the whole of America is rushing to go back home to see on TV what's happening to this girl and the fiancé who now is on the loose after probably having killed her, and you know, it becomes like there is like this reality show entertaining factor that kind of like is not part of this whole thing. The Petito murder and investigation is around a girl who herself wanted to be a influencer on the internet. So I'm just focusing on that because to make you understand, we are living in a very different world from 1776. A very different world in which, unfortunately, like we said a moment ago, the academics seem to have been bought out by the Chinese establishment very easily. They manage, and probably we have most of our young people that have been completely brainwashed by all this woke theory and all this BS that is also part of today's antagonism, false antagonism that is created by the Democrats. So if you are not woke, you are not in with the whole club. And this woke theory, we all know what it's about. So critical race theory, talking about the fact always that we have to focus on inequalities, even in the case of Gabriel Petito, we have seen immediately how they immediately said, oh, but there is a lot of black people of color, people, different races who have disappeared. Nobody talked about them. So they made it immediately a race thing, even if it had nothing to do with the race factor. So,
well, I'll tell you what, the reason why the coverage is more on her than, let's say, some inner city person that happens to be black missing is because if you look at the demographics for CNN, when they advertise, it's suburban white female that spends more money. It's that simple. It has nothing to do with race. It's about the dollar and the advertising. Suburban white females. So if you have an attractive white female that is, ends up getting killed and is, found in the forest, that plays right into white suburbia. So it's not about black versus white. It's really about who has the purse, literally, the purse strings that's spending the money for the household. And those advertisers want to reach out to that person so they can buy whatever item they're pushing on CNN. So, and it's a self-fulfilling system. It's a positive feedback loop. So people are saying, oh, it's about black versus white. No, it's about economics. It's about economics because if you had a black female that was spending more and those advertisers wanted to be talking to her and there was some story that is tangential to that, then they would be gravitating the story to some black woman that was found, in the forest. Then it's all about economics. It's not about race. It's about economics. So that's what's going on with CNN and Fox News and all them because they make their money on advertising. We don't do that. We can talk about anything because we're not beholden to advertisers, right? When was the last time you hear CNN say something bad about Boeing or Lockheed Martin or Halliburton? Well, why? Why is that? Or Procter and Gamble. So, because that's their advertisers. And who are they advertising to?
They're advertising to white suburbia.
And of course, we are half an hour to the end of the show, and we discuss also on this show, as you know, the Pope that himself has entered a controversy with himself, basically, with his own Secretary of State, when he stated that during his crisis that brought him to the hospital for that operation we discussed in the past show with you, something happened. He basically said to the Jesuits in Bratislava that they were already deciding for a new Pope. They already arranged a conclave, that they wanted him dead. They wanted him dead, and so now, though, the Secretary of State say, well, it's not like that. The Pope should be more clear or more honest about what he said. I mean, he should make the names if there is a conspiracy against him. So, I mean, this has created a lot of problems for the Pope, which at the same time is regarded today more as a geopolitical figure than a religious one, as he seems to be more involved in promoting Greta Thunberg, the climate and the vaccines, than to talk about the church. Today, in the seminaries, for example, the Jesuit seminaries, you can only accede if you vaccinate yourself. In the Vatican, you can now only accede if you are vaccinated. That is the figure. The Vatican has a statement, you cannot enter the Vatican without being vaccinated. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's tyranny. I mean, think about it just from this standpoint. The Israeli data proves that if you happen to survive SARS-CoV-2, your natural antibodies from the infection is far more superior in terms of longevity and the ability to neutralize an infection than a vaccine. So it shouldn't be just from that level. It should be, if you have antibodies, then you should be able to go to the Vatican, independent on if it's a vaccine or not, because there's lots of people that have had SARS-CoV-2 and have natural antibodies. So, but what it is an agenda to push for people to just get plugged in and get that cookie cutter solution that I was saying, that the cookie cutter solution is not the right way. It's hardwiring everybody's system to not being able to be adaptive. Now, I wanted to take a step back and not look at it from the context of SARS-CoV-2, but just look at it in the context of the history of the Vatican during my lifetime. All right, John Paul II, then Ratzinger, and then the current Pope. John Paul seemed to be a person, in my mind, was an integral person to fight against communism when he was put with Reagan and Thatcher. So it was kind of like the UK, Vatican, US kind of triad. And John Paul, I think, was a major player in part of the Cold War. Now you go into Ratzinger, he seems to me, I could be wrong on this, but he seems to me to be the more religious, studious Pope, kind of scholarly Pope. Ratzinger,
of course, and that is one of the reasons why a lot of people still consider him the real Pope. But what I wanted to also focus was the fact that the Vatican is now facing a lot of criticism because they have participated to an event, a high-level meeting, World Conference Against Racism, that apparently, though, was very much basically put together a controversial document which is widely denounced as anti-Semitic. It seems though that regarding the vaccines, with the Jewish community, the Pope has found some kind of solution. He basically they have found an alliance with this Vax extremist rabbi that is going to preach inside the Vatican gig. Now, this rabbi is called Rabbi Avraham Steinberg. He has really fanatical views on the jab, and he's been condemned by Jewish scholars and fellow rabbis as extremely misleading and hateful. But basically, he will be delivering in 2 days, on the 27th and on the 28th, this conference the Vatican is doing. It's a virtual conference, I think, so not in presence. The conference is titled Public Health in Global Perspective, Pandemics, Bioethics, Future. And in this event, apparently organized by the Pontifical Academy for Life, this guy is going to be allowed to talk and give his idea. And like I said, he's a very controversial rabbi, and he's a very, the rabbi is basically has compared unvaccinated people to murderers, this rabbi.
No, who the murderer is Fauci. He made a weapon, paid for it with our tax dollars, and you had generals thinking it was a great idea.
Yeah, but what
Those are the murderers.
do you think of this rabbi that goes against what most of them, and just like it's...
No, what he's doing is that he's causing autoimmune disorders and more student athletes having myocarditis. That's the data. VIRS has hundreds of thousands of people that are vaccine injured. Some of them are temporary, some of them are permanent, all the way to the point of being dead. So having a cookie cutter approach is leading to a final solution. So no, people need to realize that patients have autonomy. They have a right of what goes in their body. They cannot be told by a government that you have to have this. That's going against the whole ethics of patient autonomy.
Okay, as you are very close with Israel, I want to tell you, in Israel, there is a publication that is called Arutz Sheva. I don't know if you know this publication. Is the Israeli national news. The medical, they basically said to be vaccinated against their will or to punish them for their refusal as a consequence of the criminal aspect of their refusal. It means that they are really encouraging vaccine and even against your own will. It seems like really Israel is going towards an obligatory vaccine for everybody.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it's the collectivism versus egoism or individualism. Collectivism versus individualism. I side on the side, like an American, on individuality. I also side on the side of what the Hippocratic Oath states, and that is patient autonomy is paramount. All right. So, and not only that, as a fellow Jew that had a grandmother that lost her mother and brother in the Holocaust, anything that is forced upon you and not fully understanding why they're giving it to us and how they're giving it to us and what's in it, I think needs to be questioned before we go further on anything that's mandatory.
I think you are very right, because there is a rabbi called Chania Weissman who said that the Torah position on the so-called vaccine is unambiguous. He said that it forbids endangering one's health with a medical intervention that has proven to be extremely dangerous and provides little to no benefit and whose long-term effects cannot possibly be known. So it seems like the Torah is pretty clear, and so these people the Vatican seems to be this Rabbi Avraham Steinberg, somebody who instead has his own interpretation, his own. And of course, it's sad to see that the Vatican is giving him the space to do all this.
The Ten Commandments have
really deep wisdom. And it's not just thou shall not do, right? There's some deep wisdom. And it's about when you do something that there's secondary effects, tertiary effects of your actions. This rabbi that you're mentioning, that's saying that, individuals that aren't vaccinated are murderers, is basically what he's saying. No, the ones that made the virus and is forcing the hand of people to take a vaccine to a weapon they created are the perpetrators, are the killers. So we have to really go deep into the root cause. The root cause of we started the show talking about Fauci, and he's separating the vax and the unvaccinated, and that we're going to have another dark winter if we don't have enough people vaccinated. Here's the facts. We talked for a long time. I also talked with Mike Adams for a long time about the effects of habitual boosters and how it will affect your body. And the antibody-dependent enhancement that I talked to Malone for 3 hours about. You're seeing it in the data. More and more people are ending up in the hospital that are double vaxxed from Moderna or Pfizer. That's not being mentioned in the mainstream media, but that's the truth. Antibody-dependent enhancement is happening. A dark winter is going to happen. But it's not because of the unvaccinated. It's going to be because of the vaccinated. Because I just mentioned why. It's weakening our immune system and our ability to fight this infection is starting to dwindle down when they keep on adding more and more boosters, especially when we get to the fourth one. Then you're really going to start seeing this. But I go as like the typical engineer. What's the root cause? If your car isn't starting, it's not because the key is not in the ignition. All right. It might be because the solenoid is burnt out. All right. You got to go to the root cause. The root cause of this problem was a weapons program that was developed and financed by the United States that shouldn't have been done. And anyone that deviates from that root cause is part of the problem. Vaccinated people or unvaccinated people are not the issue. The issue is that people in the United States were developing things they shouldn't have been developing. And now we have a situation where now they're putting mandates on people. So I would state that the unvaccinated person, they're not at fault. They didn't cause this issue. Who caused the issue, who dug the hole for everyone to fall in, was Fauci. He's at fault, not the unvaccinated.
41 minutes past the hour, wherever you're following us around the world. This is the Leo Zagami Show live from Palm Springs, California and New York City with Dr. Paul Cottrell. We are broadcasting live on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network, on Aftermath FM, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on a number of platforms in the following days. Our weekly rundown of the latest news that includes, of course, always these interesting discussions regarding COVID, regarding the vaccinations, but also regarding other events that we have discussed, of course, the economic situation with this Chinese Lehman Brothers possibility, which, of course, you don't seem to believe is going to happen because China, fortunately enough, is going to probably pay for their faults, and hopefully we are not going to be paying for our faults. And at the same time, also because I think the world is pretty fed up of China. China that in general is threatening the rest of the world, also militarily. And there is countries like Australia that feel particularly threatened. And we have seen also all the debacle regarding the sale of nuclear submarines from America to France, because Australia wants to defend its island, continent, whatever you want to call it, from a possible invasion from China. That might happen once Taiwan is invaded, because if China moves forward, and that's a possible thing that's going to happen in the next few years with the invasion of Taiwan, then the next country to be invaded could be Australia. Who knows? In any case, I want to discuss also with you the fact that the House on Thursday overwhelmingly approved $1 billion in new funding for Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. And this has been also sparking a series of controversy. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, two things I wanted to say. One was about the Iron Dome, and one was about Australia.
Yeah. Okay.
So with the Iron Dome,
there is a similarity here, because these are two countries that want to defend themselves. Of course, Israel are very small reality.
Right. You got it. So what happened? If you look at the history of war, especially contemporary war, the United States isn't usually the first one hit. It's the second or third or fourth, and the ones that take the hit originally are, like, look at World War I as a perfect example. Even World War II, we waited for the Germans to get a little bit worn down, the French a little worn down, the British worn down, then we came in sweep, right? Well, that's what's happening in the Middle East with Israel. Israel is our proxy, and they'll be the ones to get the first, hit, and have to, the first, wave, right? And then the United States will come in and bail out. It's a little bit bigger issue and more intense and more World War-ish with what's going on in the Pacific. What will happen with the Australians is that they will be the allied force that will get the first hit when the Chinese start to encroach on Taiwan and the island chains that go all the way to Japan. So you're going to have three allies that are at risk here, and that are going to be getting the first hit in World War IV or World War III, depending on how you want to count it. All right, so in World War III, Taiwan is attacked. Japan gets worried, and they start to lose some of the smaller islands that are south of their main archipelago. And you start to hear that the Aussies are having trouble in maintaining defenses in the Pacific and needs the help of the British and the United States. This is very reminiscent to what was going on during World War II. And I find it very odd, almost like Bible code-ish, that the Aussies will be similar to the French for World War III as the French was in World War II. And they'll be worn down, but then what will happen is that the United States comes in and helps out, because the Aussies are going to take that big hit from China, but China is also going to be taking a big hit from the Aussies. The United States doesn't want to go in head-to-head with the Chinese, because I think the military history would show that the United States would probably lose in the war. That we'd be worn down too quickly. It's better to have an ally worn down, and we backstop the ally, and then come in while they start to wear down our enemy, the Chinese. I think that is the big play that's going on in the Pacific. I'm for it. I'm all for this, because my grandfather, CB, World War II, some of the first, did the island hopping and pushed back the Japanese. I do not want to see our hegemonic power in the Pacific lost to the Chinese. Absolutely not. So, you know what? Game on. It's time to get G.I. Joe. It's time to become G.I. Joe.
Yeah, but it seems that Joe Biden, we're never going to be G.I. Joe. We're never going to be anything because he has been already corrupted by China, and he's like
right.
with his hot cocoa, and he just chills out. This weekend, he left again for Camp David. Probably is going to play his video games in the basement there. That's what's happening with Joe Biden. I mean, I don't know, maybe in another reality with another president, your input could have been realistic. With this president is absolutely unrealistic. And let's not forget Iran, like one of our viewers is pointing out here. Let's not forget Iran. Of course, helped very much by the billions of dollars, gold, whatever was given to them by Obama back in the days. And they are continuing the development, of course, of their possible nuclear arsenal in the future. Whenever they're gonna manage to do that, then it's gonna be a real threat for Israel. So yes, Australia is definitely gonna be the one that takes the first hit, and probably Australia is one of the countries that has also, though at the moment, some internal problems. They even been hit by a mysterious earthquake. I say mysterious because earthquakes don't usually hit Australia. And this was a pretty strong earthquake, 5.9, to hit Melbourne. And the same day there were more protests, third day of protests in Melbourne. I have images every day that are sent to me, and the police, it's acting in ways that is incredible. They even go in the house of a guy only because he's suspected of possibly doing something, but he has done absolutely nothing. Or one guy gets beaten in the street simply because they think he's too far from his own home to be simply walking around. So he must be a protester. I mean, the Australians are really losing it completely. So, I mean, if they get invaded by China, it will not really make, at this point, I tell you, paradoxically, on the 25th of September 2021, their government is maybe 1 inch more inclined to take away their human freedoms than China. I mean, China is already bad, but Australia seems even worse.
There is a historic analog in the United States of something very similar in the 1920s. There was Nazism that was starting to take hold in the United States when the Nazi movement was just starting in Germany. Okay? So it wouldn't surprise me that you have, how do I want to phrase this? In Australia, a group of individuals that are part of the intelligentsia that want to sell out the country to the Chinese.
Absolutely, and I had the evidence of it in their famous program they do in Australia. I think it's called 60 Minutes too, like the one we have here in the US. You know, they have their own show there. I was watching this show they made a few days ago regarding the possibility of a Chinese invasion, and there was this guy, this intellectual of Chinese origins, clearly of Chinese origins, intellectual Australian, who was there preaching the fact that we should just accept China, and we shouldn't fear China, and that there will never be any war, and we shouldn't have any war, and we shouldn't buy any submarines, or we shouldn't, by basically purchasing the submarines, entering this alliance with Great Britain and America, it seems like China is finally losing it. And this guy was like the typical example of what you're saying. The Australian intelligence that has sold out the country already. Say, no, but it's no problem.
Well, you know, a really important fact, it was the Australian biosecurity
department that funded the 2008 paper for Dr. Shi, which is the genesis of SARS-CoV-2, in conjunction with EcoHealth Alliance, the EC, the European Union, the EU, I meant, and Wuhan, through China. Those funds came in to help with the research that Dr. Shi did for the published paper in 2008. Don't you find that strange that it was Australia? And if you look at the history of what we've been covering since the beginning of 2020, January of 2020, all these draconian measures seem to be prototyped in Australia. All these 1984 type stuff. I don't think that's a coincidence. They funded the research, and then now they're prototyping on how to whip the citizens into compliance. So there's something going on in Australia. I'm not saying that the Aussies as a people are bad. Their government is. And that, and what's going on with the Australian government is similar to what's going on with the US government here.
They're being corrupt.
Yes.
Being corrupt, yes. And in the end, is the people, of course, that lose their freedoms. And in this case, though, we are a little bit more far away from China than they are. They have realistically already a confrontation with China there in the Pacific, where China in the last few years has aggressively one island after the other.
Well, you think about
the other their influence, no?
So, right. And just go back to 2010. 2010, there was a huge commodity trade that was going on between Australia with iron ore and China because they were growing. They needed coal and they needed iron. Australia was providing a lot of the natural resources that China needed. Mm-hmm. So there was this huge post-Lehman recovery commodity trade in international finance between the Chinese and the Aussies. So there was some deep connections that were starting to be established. Those financial deep connections are similar, not exact, but similar to the deep financial connections of what was going on pre-World War II between the United States and the Nazis. And, there were people that were in high power, the Bushes were one of them, that wanted to actually help the Nazis.
We have only 5 minutes left. I want to just make you hear quickly to Jason Jansen Lee, who is the president of the Chinese Australian Forum, who I think is the typical Chinese agent, of course, a member of the Australian intelligentsia, intellectuals, whatever you want to call them, who has already sold out their country.
Yes, there is a bad China, where China does things that we find unacceptable. But I think it's really important for Australia to accept that there is also a good China. There are things that China does and can do that are for the benefit of the world.
Ooh. See? That's what I was talking about.
Well, specifically, what is he saying that is beneficial?
In fact, the beneficial side. We should. I think next time, maybe for the next episode next week, we should analyze a little bit better what he said.
Right. I mean, I don't know of one thing that is beneficial from China that we should be importing. Culturally, or governmental theory or anything like that. I think they are the epitome of total control of a large society. Yeah. It is 1984. And so, no, that type of thing is cancer. And cancer needs to be taken out, destroyed, abolished.
I mean, Melbourne today, it's definitely closer than ever to Beijing in the way the police is treating their crowds, in the way they are absolutely distancing themselves from the freedoms that we used to have in the Western world. Australia is becoming more and more like China every day, and their politicians are definitely corrupt. I hope that this doesn't happen here in the United States of America. But let me remind all our viewers and listeners where they can find, of course, our work. Paul Cottrell, Studio Reykjavik, the website. There you will find also all the remedies that he has pointed out today when he talked about those forced to take the vaccine and what kind of solutions they can implement to avoid the problems that come out of it. And then we have, of course, my books. My books you can find on Amazon. You can find the link on my website, leozagami.com. This is volume 6.66, dedicated to Cyber Satan. Then you have this with all the everything regarding the decline of the Western world and the rise of Satanism in our society, but also regarding the pandemic, because there is an update of 100 pages that I included in the new edition. Then volume 4, of course, another incredible book to understand also the connection between the Sabbatean Frankists, the heretics of the Jewish world, and the Jesuits, and what the Jesuits and the Vatican have done behind the scenes to manifest this satanic world, and of course behind the scenes with other secret societies supporting people like Nancy Pelosi and whatnot. We have reached the end of our Saturday show. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul Cottrell, for being with us on Saturday, 25th of September. Do you have anything else you want to tell us?
No, I just wanted to make sure that the ones that are listening, just go to Amazon and buy Leo's books. They're great. You're going to get some great information. Not only that, it helps support his work so he can continue on informing the public on important events.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul Cottrell, and thank you so much for all our viewers and listeners from around the world. Next week at 10 a.m. PST, 11 a.m. MT, 12 p.m. CST, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and we have given the whole thing.
We're gonna have to do Tokyo time and Milan.
Take care, guys. All the best. All the best.
Bye bye. Bye bye.